Welcome to another edition of Courtside with Rob and Washut. But before we head over to the arena, I want to give a big thank you to our sponsors of the show, Group Therapy Bike Tours and Slim Chickens. We'll start with Group Therapy. They are all in on the Nebraska basketball wave. Head over to grouptherapybiketours.com and book your ride today for all of your pregame, post-game, whenever game, birthday party, wedding, family reunion, corporate event. They have a 15-person trolley ride, a 6-person mini bike for whatever event you want to celebrate. And like I said, it is full force in Nebraska. If you've gone to a Nebraska game, I'm sure you've seen the trolleys riding around the Haymarket and downtown Lincoln. If you go over to grouptherapybiketours.com and use the promo code NebraskaBall, you will save 15% on your first ride. So make sure you head on over there and support our great sponsor. It's a ton of fun. I've been on it several times. Could not recommend it enough. Now over to our other sponsors, Slim Chickens. Bill Hooks and his wife Stacy are diehard Nebraska fans, and they couldn't wait to jump on the Nebraska basketball train. Locally owned Slim Chickens has 2 locations, 84th and Old Cheney and 16th and Pine Lake. Slim Chickens features a variety of options with fried and grilled chicken tenders, wings, salads, wraps, sandwiches, chicken and waffles, and southern sides. What makes Slim's different? Well, they have over 17 different dipping sauces for guests to choose their favorite. Slim Chickens is available for dine-in, drive-through, or delivery via their online ordering. Check out Slim Chickens app and start earning rewards today. Slim Chickens is always a favorite for large gatherings and tailgate parties, especially Nebraska basketball tailgate parties, and let them do the cooking for you. Slim Chickens is moving forward, and they are expanding to the north side of Lincoln soon, so keep an eye out for that. Stop into your local Slim Chickens restaurant today for some southern hospitality and see their newly remodeled locations. Again, thanks to all our sponsors. Now let's head over to the arena and take you courtside with me, Rob and Washut. Welcome back to another edition of Courtside with Rob and Washut here just a couple hours before tip-off before Nebraska's home game against Washington, 8 p.m. Central tip on Big Ten Network. And this is one of those games where it's kind of another test in the sense for Nebraska that they're expected to win, and they're expected to win big. I think the line opened around 11.5. It's fluctuated anywhere from 10.5 to 12 over the last 24 hours or so. So, it's one of those kind of similar to, the Oregon game where, there's a sold-out home crowd against a team that's kind of beat up in Washington, and Nebraska's rolling. Obviously just reached their highest ranking in program history, up to 7th in the AP poll. And so this is one of those, you would expect Nebraska to come out and take care of business, but that's a challenge, especially when you're fighting off the positivity, which is weird to say, but Nebraska's in the unique situation and hasn't really spent a lot of time here where people are kind of starting to buy in to what they're doing. The kind of theme was, proving people wrong. Well, now people are picking you as a 1 seed. People are voting you as a top 10, borderline top 5 team in the country. Now the challenge is about living up to that and doing what you're supposed to do in a game that you're supposed to win and do so convincingly. So that's going to be kind of what I'm going to be watching for this one is just how Nebraska attacks this one. I want to see them coming out of the gate hot. They have a significant advantage in the three-point line. Washington has a good front court led by Hannes Steinbach, one of the best freshmen, not only in the Big Ten, but all of college basketball. So he's going to be a challenge on the inside. But from the perimeter, Washington just doesn't have it. They've got one guy that's, even a remote threat from three-point range. Nebraska's got an entire roster full of guys that can make threes, so you would expect that to be a pretty big X factor in this one. But for me, obviously you got to hit shots on the other end. But with this game and with any other game that Nebraska plays, it's about the defensive intensity. And when Nebraska's locked in on that end of the floor, they can compete with and beat any team on their schedule, especially one like Washington that's talented, has some good talented individual pieces, but they just aren't a very connected offense right now. It really runs through one guy in Steinbach, and they have some other players that flash here and there, but really no consistency beyond their freshman forward. So, this is one of those where Nebraska needs to set the tone with their defense, make Washington earn it on every trip, get them frustrated, and then exploit your stops, your turnovers that you force into transition offense, get the tempo that you want, and knock down the threes when they're there. So, again, there's not a lot that I think scares you about Washington. Again, they have talented pieces. The problem is that a lot of those talented pieces outside of Steinbach aren't even going to play. They were announced today on the availability report that Wesley Yates, one of their transfers from USC, who was averaging 13 a game off the bench, has already been ruled out for this game. Apparently, he fell a few games ago on his wrist and played like 8 minutes against Michigan after missing a couple. Now he's already ruled out. So that's a big piece for Washington to try to replicate. And then Desmond Claude earlier this week, their other USC transfer, who is their second leading scorer, ruled himself out, saying that he was going to step away from basketball to focus on his health, meaning he had an ankle injury that he had surgery on this offseason that never really fixed the problem. And so he was going to step away and try to focus on his recovery. So you would think he's out, right? Well, they list on the availability report, they listed him as questionable, which caught my attention. And, looking at some other college basketball national analysts, they were surprised by this. So to be determined what Desmond Claude's availability actually is for this one. But either way, even if he plays, it's an injured shooting wrist. So if he plays, he'll be limited. So that just kind of goes back to the point where Washington just doesn't have a lot of firepower, especially on the perimeter. Now, they have guys that can beat you if you don't do what you're supposed to do. But Nebraska has done what it's supposed to do more often than not on the defensive end. And I think this is going to be one of those games where you see like a Rink Mast, finally take the lid off. After only playing less than 20 minutes over the last two games, he should be as fresh as he could possibly be right now. And I think this is a game that sets up well for him to get going from three-point range and get back to that offensive dominance that he's shown thus far this season. So some, unique storylines to kind of watch in this one. But, for me, this is one that I picked Nebraska to win. I picked him to cover. And it wouldn't surprise me if, maybe this one is another one of those games where it's back and forth a little bit through most of the first half, and then Nebraska goes on a little bit of a run to close the end of the first half, and then blows the door open to start the second half. If you look at the beginning of second halves this season, Nebraska has been incredible in jumping on teams and doing what they call a kill shot, coined by Evan Maya. He defines a kill shot as a run of 10 straight points or more. I think Nebraska's like second nationally, or at least top 5 nationally in kill shots this season. So that's been kind of a hallmark of what they've done all year long, is jumping on teams with those kind of game-changing runs that they never look back from. It's happened a lot this season, and this kind of has one of those games where I think if the avalanche starts to pour on Washington, I'm just not sure if they have enough to respond, especially, maybe the biggest X factor at all is another sold-out game, even on a Wednesday night at 8 o'clock here at PB. I expect the fans to be rocking and should be more than enough to lead Nebraska to victory. But, again, that's why they play the game. Nebraska's supposed to win. I think they should win, but they got to go out and do it. Let's take a walk here. If you look behind me, got the cheers or the stance squad warming up. Got Braden Frager in the background, like always. First guy out here getting up shots. Strength coach Kurt Joseph, Peyton Borders. Two of maybe, especially Peyton. He doesn't get talked enough about what he does for this team. He started as a manager on the team and has eventually worked his way up to a full-time position. And if you go back to Las Vegas when Adam Howard, go for the crown last year, when Adam Howard left to take the NC State job, Peyton over here stepped in and kind of took on more on-court responsibilities and, played a pretty underappreciated role in just the day-to-day practice prep, game prep for Nebraska during that crown run that really set the table for this season. So shout out Peyton, underappreciated, but an A1 dude. And then Kurt Joseph, the strength coach, he's been here. I think he took over maybe a year or two into Fred's tenure. I can't remember if he was here first. Either way, he has been invaluable. And you talk about how the second half runs that Nebraska goes on, that's because they're the better conditioned team. I think the Indiana game was a perfect example of that. The Northwestern game was a perfect example of that, where Nebraska didn't get tired. Indiana and Northwestern wore down as the game went along. And while they're huffing and puffing on the sidelines and, trying to catch their breath during timeouts, Nebraska's barely even breaking a sweat. And they're getting stronger as the game goes on. That is a absolute testament to the job Kurt Joseph has done to get this team in tip-top shape and absolutely ready to play every single day. So, again, this is one of those deals where Fred and Nate Lenzer and Ernie Ziegler and Pat Monahan, the assistant coaches, they get a lot of the credit. But there's so much to this operation that has gotten Nebraska to this point. Guys like Peyton Borders, guys like Kurt Joseph, the equipment guy, Pat Norris. I mean, just so many layers that have this operation clicking at such a high level that it's beyond what you draw up on the whiteboard. It's beyond what you say and do in practice. It is literally every part of the process. And another interesting storyline going back to just kind of the grind of Big Ten play. Nebraska's playing 6 games in 17 days. That is a grueling stretch that is not atypical in Big Ten play. But how do you do that? Well, recovery takes paramount over everything. And one thing that Nebraska has done an excellent job of this year is prioritizing recovery as much as probably any team that I've seen. And like what I mean by that is not only are they doing like yoga and cold tub work and lots of stretching and all sorts of treatment, all those things to make sure that their bodies are good to go every day between practices, between games. Their road, when they travel, they bring their own cold tub. I don't know if I've ever heard of a team that travels with their own cold tub. And the team, as a result, spends at least an hour after every game on the road in the visitor locker room going through the cold tub to make sure that these players are sticking to their recovery routines to stay in tip-top shape and make sure that during these quick 48-hour, 72-hour turnarounds, whatever they may be, that their legs are as fresh as they possibly can be. So a critical part to surviving the annual Big Ten grind, and I think it's a big reason why Nebraska's had the success, particularly on the road, is because of all the work that everybody within this program, top to bottom, does on a daily basis. I'm going to sign off right now. Make sure to tune in after the game for post-game analysis. And once again, thank you to our sponsors, Group Therapy Bike Tours and Slim Chickens, two great friends of Courtside with Rob and Washut.